I now have the jacket on the stand inside out because we're going to now position the shoulder pad into place. So shoulder pads usually have a little mark to denote the center. This lines with the shoulder seam underneath. The shoulder pad also comes right to the edge of the raw edge of the jacket and the canvas in the armhole position. We are then going to baste the shoulder pad to the front canvas, just to the canvas only in position. So across the shoulder point, down and around to hold in place. Once we've done that, we are then going to pad stitch the canvas to the shoulder pad. You can see by my stitches here that they're rather large and not as careful as our other pad stitching, but this is just to anchor the shoulder pad to the canvas. Once we've done that, I'm also going to place a small back tack to the neck edge of our canvas to our shoulder seam allowance. So I'm going to align those together and just run a little back stitch tack there to hold that in place. The back of the shoulder pad gets held in position after we insert the sleeve, because all this is moved out of the way while we insert the sleeve, and then that gets tacked into place afterwards. So once we have our shoulder pads pad stitched on both sides, we are now ready to construct the body lining to insert up and around the facing edge of the jacket. So in our notes, we mentioned that I have basted through on our roll line here to hold our facing in place. Also, I did the same on the collar, basting through on the seam there. This is to do some work, sort of pre-lining prep, just before we attach the lining. So, basting this together when it is on the stand, the lapel is folded over and it is in the right place, making sure we have enough fabric coming over as it is folded back on itself. So then opening up and running parallel to this basting line, I've hem stitched loosely here the facing to our reinforcement tape here, and then I've continued down a few centimeters onto the canvas. We want to be careful that this stitch is not seen on the facing side. It won't be seen on the right side because we have all the layers of thicknesses to go through here. This ensures that the facing is actually attached to the body of the garment. Below the roll line we have the button and the buttonhole, which anchors it there for us. So we've done the same thing on the collar, where we've basted here. If I fold that underneath, you can see I've anchored the seam allowance of the collar just above our zigzag stitch here. Again, this stops these layers coming apart, as you can see on the front. It just gives some anchorage there to stabilize the jacket. The next points we discuss in our worksheet cover the vent and the hem. So on the vent, as it sits flat from the wrong side, we are looking at the undervent, which is the top vent from the right side. I have stitched from the top of the vent about halfway down to hold this in place. This side is held by the lining, and that secures everything in position. Then we talk about the hem. Now the hem is anchored in sections across the front. We have a stabilizing tape running all the way around the front, and we have interfacing on the back. Now, as the fabric we're working with is very fine, I'm only going to stitch where I have the interfacing for example, here on the back panel, from the seam halfway across. This eliminates any risk of the stitching being seen on the right side as we're actually catching the interfacing. The same principle on the front. I've started from halfway, sort of just below our dart on the canvas, across to the edge of the canvas. Our hem here is stabilised because we have the tape, but if I was to stitch with such a fine fabric, there is a risk that it's going to come through. It will be held in place by the lining, and the anchorage we've got at the side will hold that in place. So we want that hand stitching to be done before we attach the lining, to make sure it's easy access, nothing else is in our way, it just makes it easier. And we're sitting all our stitching back from the cut edge because we need this allowance to actually machine stitch the lining too.